There is a fundamental problem when considering the edges of the world. The edges are determined by where we think the center is. And I thought that was very poignant, talking about strength and conditioning coaches in a tactical setting, because a lot of times coaches come into this world having been centered around what we always talk about: professional sport, collegiate sport, in this case, high performers, whatever you want. That is their center. Therefore, anything that they perceive to be on the fringes of that is oftentimes considered weird, or it's an outlier. I would throw CrossFit in there for a lot of coaches. CrossFit's considered this like weird thing. Team, welcome back to another week of Mops and Mo's podcast. I don't know why I did it like that, but hot topic this week. We're going to talk about bad coaches. So hot, in fact, that you, Alex, just took off your shacket.
I got a little warm. I took off my shacket. Drew apparently has questions about shackets in general. I'm going to turn it over to him.
You keep saying the word. You keep saying the word shacket. I mean, I know obviously what it is.
What's your problem? What's your problem with that word?
Jacket. It's a shirt jacket. Is that the official industry term? Shacket?
I don't think it's an official term, but it's an effective descriptor of what it is. Like, it's between like a heavy flannel shirt and a jacket, or sometimes they're lined with fleece.
Overshirt. That's what I know it as.
Big fan.
Overshirt.
But a shacket is a term. I'm not the only one running around talking about shackets.
You're certainly not. I will tell you that in December of 2022, Musk Ox Flannels penned the now infamous article, "So What the Hell is a Shacket?" In which this is a link. I haven't clicked on it, team. But shackets versus overshirts, what's the difference? So
here's my, Drew's got feelings about shackets. I just want to share like a general hot take. I got a transition that's been happening in my life recently.
From shirt to
and
jacket.
Technically the particular shacket I took off a few moments ago is not a part of this trend. It is from, and like, no free ads. The one I was just wearing is from Mountain Khakis. Turns out Mountain Khakis has like a 40% military discount. That's crazy.
There are other shacket companies out there.
And in fact, they don't even specialize in jackets. They specialize in khakis, as you might guess by their name.
I don't know if anybody specializes in shackets.
Is that an opening in the market that I need to seize?
Industry-leading shacket.
Another purveyor of shackets that I have been buying from frequently. I have become a huge fan of Kirkland brand apparel.
Oh my God, dude.
I used to judge people so hard. This is like my granddad bought clothes there.
This is a real phase that men go through. The Costco clothing phase.
I thought it was for old people, and maybe I'm old now, but like, I've got some good joggers from there. I've got some good like waffle shirts from there. They have a broad selection of shackets.
God. Do you also have a renewed interest in World War II and smoking meats? Because apparently
I'm not quite there yet, but that seems like it comes as part of the deal.
I think you skipped a step. You gotta be the youngest dude shopping at Costco for like legit clothes.
I'll be honest.
Does Costco have a changing room?
No, you just have to roll with it. You don't get to try it on. You got to trust. They have a generous return policy, but you gotta just trust.
There are other big box retailers, no free ads.
And often they carry products from other brands. Like, not everything they sell there is house brand or anything.
Okay, here's a fun one. What's the most expensive thing you can buy at Costco?
They have insanely expensive liquors sometimes, and wines, like tens of thousands of dollars.
Guess. I'll give you a price.
Is it alcohol?
$600,000.
No, that's not alcohol. That's a house.
It's a ring.
Oh, there you go.
Diamonds.
Look at that.
I don't know if that's true or not.
I mean, I believe it. They have crazy stuff.
You can buy $500 balsamic vinegar.
But like, people who follow along with the Instagram will know, and we've mentioned on the podcast too, I'm a big like Lululemon Viore like athleisure dude. I'm currently wearing
that is the
Viore shirt,
total opposite of Costco.
And I have to acknowledge that that I recently purchased some joggers at Costco that are just as nice as my Viore joggers. but they were
Actually, you know what?
$17.
I will give out a free ad. CRZ Yoga is the brand on Amazon. Um, I think it's a Chinese knockoff brand, whatever.
The joke is you're
Same,
supposed to say no free ads when you're doing a free ad.
but I'm giving these people a free ad because I actually like what they're doing here. Same factory, as far as I know, that like Lulu stuff comes out of.
Mhm.
They just rebrand it. So you
There
can get
are
Lulu
a
stuff
variety
for
of
like
companies.
$15.
Yeah, there are a variety of companies that rent time, usually night
Mm-hmm.
hours, on the same production lines where like Nike and stuff is made.
This
And
happens a lot too with food. I didn't
yeah,
realize that like a lot of canned goods are the same thing and they just change the label.
there are. I googled it
So
because I'd never heard of CRZ yoga before, but there are like people fighting online about which is better, CRZ or Lulu. It'd be really funny if they
that's
genuinely were
how I
identical
found
because
it.
that would make all the fighting hilarious.
They literally, I have a pair of Lulu shorts, 5-inch inseam because I have self respect.
Of course,
Naturally.
the correct length. Yeah,
Yep. And I have an identical pair of CRZ shorts, and they are the same down to the obnoxiously long tag that you get at
including the
Lulu.
like unique seams, like the curved
Yep.
seams and stuff.
Curve
Okay,
seams, zippers, same thing.
okay,
I mean, it feels cheaper,
interesting.
but it's like the price difference. Anyway, nothing to do with what we're talking about.
No,
Um,
not at all.
Nothing at all. So, well, do you want to give some context to like where did this come from? What are we doing?
Yeah, I should. This is a spin-off of a conversation that's been happening all over the place. Like we often say here, one of the things we try to do with Mops and Mo's is bring the conversations that are happening behind closed doors all over the place out into public.
Like
So this is a conversation
Lululemon
I think
knockoffs.
a lot of people have. Sure, maybe not quite. Um, but I think there's some important context notes to provide before we dive in. Like Drew said, one is that I think it's impossible to ignore the fact that coaches are the face of every military human performance program. I've worked with or for a couple programs, interfaced with others. Uh, there's a lot of variation on what kind of staff they have, whether they have athletic trainers or not, whether they have dietitians or not, whether they have whatever, like all these other things. One thing is constant across all of them. I think every single military human performance program employs strength and conditioning coaches, uh, other than some like one-off single discipline things, which I don't know if you can call yourself a military human performance program if you're only doing one discipline. You're kind of more specialized. Whatever. That's beside the point. But we also all know that there are good and bad coaches out there on these teams. One thing I think we will not do in this episode is get wrapped up in some of the structural reasons why there might be varying levels of quality of coaches between programs. We're not going to dive into the pay stuff. We're not going to dive into the contracting stuff. We're not going to dive into the like race to the bottom issue with government contracting. But I started this one with a real quick post based on some conversations I was having on the side. And the question was, which is worse? No strength coach at all or a bad strength coach? And nearly 90% of people, to be precise, 88% of people answered that a bad strength coach is worse than no strength coach at all. And I think that is an important thing to first acknowledge, just like put that out there into the universe, that a bad strength coach is worse than no coach. Like, I feel like that's something that like people who are in decision maker roles should probably appreciate about like how to build effective programs in this space. It also raises a quantity versus quality issue. Like if a bad coach is worse than no coach, then 8 bad coaches is definitely a worse option than one good coach. And that starts to help with the math of how do you pay people living wages and like attract decent talent to your program. But like I said, we're going to put all that aside. And what we're going to focus on in this episode was the follow-up question I put up where we said, okay, you acknowledge that a bad strength coach is worse than no coach. What actually makes a coach bad? Like, what are the issues that you're talking about when you're picturing a bad coach in your head? And so for the rest of this, we're going to dig through the answers people on the Instagram and Facebook page provided.
And to be clear, this is not necessarily a scripted conversation. but if you're watching, and obviously inevitably if you're listening, we've chunked these into we've chunked these submissions, you could call them, into categories. Um, I'll just rattle through those real quick: communication, interdisciplinary, barbell bro, culture slash setting, programming, and then other. Bit of a catch-all. And we'll kind of just we'll dance around those. And as is often the case when you and I come and hang out together on Riverside, who knows? Who knows where we go?
Yeah, not a lot of planning here. I basically just took everybody's answers,
intentional,
and yeah, for sure. But I will acknowledge a couple things up front. I did eliminate some duplicates. Like some people said exactly the same thing as each other. So we won't hit the same thing multiple times. We're not going to be able to get through every single one of these. I did, other than duplicates and a few I eliminated for being like clearly talking about a specific person. I put those off to the side. We'll talk through the ones that are easier to keep like anonymous and like avoid digging into situations that I know nothing about.
What makes a bad strength coach? David. Oh.
I will, on some of these, I can remember the profession of the person who, this was a really popular question. Not a lot of you guys, I don't think I've ever gotten this many answers to
people like bitching about stuff.
Like free response question. Like polls, we get hundreds and hundreds of answers, like, because all you got to do is click a thing and move on. But for these ones where you have to actually articulate yourself and type something out, we don't get quite as many. But this one we got like at least 100. It was a lot.
Yeah.
And some reflect the specific profession of the person answering. Like a few of these were answers from coaches, but a lot were answers from soldiers and or other human performance professionals that work around coaches. And some of the answers kind of give away some of that. So we'll acknowledge some of the like different perspectives as we go through.
And one last quick point before diving in, lest you feel as though we are being too negative, it's important to remember the opposite of bad is good. And so if you feel as though all we're doing is rattling off things that make you a bad coach, just reverse it. And you could think of these as things you could do the opposite of to make you a good coach. Just want to put that disclaimer out there before people start texting us saying that we are being dicks. Where do you want to kick this off? Communication?
I think we start with the ones that like we had the most consistent agreement among people answering the question on. And I know some people get wrapped in the weeds about like programming and periodization. That was not the area where we had the most consistent answers that like lined up and the most number of them. I would say, and the buckets are not perfect. I came up with these buckets like 5 minutes ago, and they could probably be adjusted and revised. But the first two kind of go together. The first one is communication, and the second one is culture and setting. And they were by far the most referenced issues for coaches. And I think like,
which kind of tells you you talked about programming and exercise, and I mean, like this kind of tells you what's most important to the audience.
Yeah. So I think we start there. So you want to take one or you want me to pull one?
I'll grab one. Communication. So failure to adapt, poor dialogue with all echelons of leadership. Knowledge isn't the problem. Seems pretty straightforward.
I think it's straightforward. I think if you're involved in like human performance LinkedIn, like I am, you'll see this topic come up occasionally. The it's all about knowledge argument tends to be the rebuttal to like, you don't have to be fit to be a coach. It's all about the amount of knowledge you have. And I think this ties back to a broader issue that will probably surface a couple times during this conversation, which is that I think there probably are some settings where being really good at programming is the deciding factor. But all of those settings are places where the athletes are already very high performers and you can take motivation for granted. Like it's not the coach's job to get people to care. In the setting we speak to most, which is conventional military human performance, because special operations probably has a mix of the two. But as you get more into the conventional, quote unquote, regular force, you cannot take the motivation piece for granted. And like programming becomes irrelevant if you can't get people to follow it. So what becomes really important is coaches that can get people to do whatever the program is, whether that program's good or not. And I think you're going to hear that a lot in a lot of these answers. The words poor dialogue actually appeared in like a half dozen of the responses that we got on this question.
I would
Yeah.
I would push back a little bit, only to say that if what you're looking for is the type of job that only cares about your programming, you should have gotten a degree in computer science.
Got him.
Because yeah, because the motivation that you speak of oftentimes is a result of a coach who can communicate well. And I say that from having grown up as a strength coach in a special operations environment with highly motivated people. And it still came down to whether or not those people decided to work with me or not was not mandated. So it was all about how I was able to relate and communicate to that audience. I
I'll
agree with
also
what you're
offer,
saying. Please.
I'll just offer that I have heard coaches argue for this should be mandated. That way I don't have to
No,
do
it
the
shouldn't
sales
be
thing. It should just
mandated.
be mandatory.
No, it shouldn't
I
be
don't think it should
mandated.
be mandated. There's a lot of things that are mandated in
No,
the military and nobody likes them.
no.
That's just kind of it.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, I think this is probably, as we go through this pretty organically, I think this is one we're going to come back to a lot, which is just like coaches refusing to, let me preface this. Bad coaches refusing to adapt to their environment, assuming their environment should adapt to them. And whether that is manifested through communication, as in these examples, or in other ways, which we'll probably get into. I think for me, at least, the recurring kind of like cherry on top for what I perceive to be a bad coach, or quite frankly, a bad practitioner in any capacity, is just a failure to adapt to your environment. I have always been of the opinion, and I think I've said it here, that there are no such thing as bad athletes, just bad coaches. Obviously, on the fringes, people will disagree with that, and fair play, but I believe that there is always a way in which one human can connect to another. And I think that we see that very acutely in strength and conditioning, because if the athlete doesn't want to work with you, they'll just walk away and you can blame the athlete for being a bad athlete. Um, I'm kind of going on a rambling rant here, but
I think I
for
can
me, it comes
offer
back to a
a
failure to
piece of it.
adapt. Please.
All right. Well, failure to adapt appears,
A lot.
the words failure to adapt appear frequently in answers we got from people. Those are mostly under the culture bucket that we'll get to next.
Mm-hmm.
But something that comes to mind as you're describing it, and this kind of settles the like programming versus relationships argument for me. If you ask somebody like who a really great coach they had was, even if you say like a really great strength and conditioning coach, and then ask them why, I guarantee the person doesn't describe like the X's and O's of their programming. I guarantee
No.
they talk about like how they made you feel, what they taught you, like lasting
At
impact
least
they had
not
on you, the example they set.
at least not in this setting. And I kind of got into that. Shameless plug to our blog where I just put up that post about just run. This is not a setting where the weight on the bar matters, so to speak. And I think if you were to ask world champion powerlifters or Olympic athletes, that's where you could and sometimes do hear references to coaches that were great because they helped you achieve some level of objective performance. But I think we are in the business of like interpersonal relationships. And there's probably a much deeper conversation we could have about that. But to your point, the really good coaches, the ones whose names constantly come up when you talk to like tactical athletes, are the ones that were able to connect with you. And then the exercises that they gave you were just sort of secondary. Um, so yeah.
I'm going to go on a weird, crazy tangent that I had not planned on.
Oh,
I'm just
excited.
going to go ahead and state the Army's doctrinal definition of coaching because I think it's helpful. It's also weird to me that I had not looked up the Army's doctrinal definition of coaching until like 2 days
I was
ago.
going to say, this is not a weird tangent because you have doctrine pretty much off the cuff.
No, I mean, I have fitness doctrine off the cuff and some like fitness policy off the cuff.
There's an Army doctrine that talks about coaching?
there's doctrine for everything, my dude. And like teach, coach, mentor are like primary roles of leaders in the
Oh,
Army. So
fair.
they have like
Yeah, no, that's
clearly
fair.
defined, and then like counseling as a subcategory of coaching. Those are all really important to the Army. The Army takes these things very seriously. But like I feel like it says something about where we're at in terms of like really integrating human performance into the way the Army actually runs, that despite spending the last, like, at this point, over 6 years, definitely. Yeah, I don't know. Depends on where
Well,
you
I
do the
mean,
math, but like involved in
POTUS's been
coaching, like
around since, yeah.
involved in human performance for the military. I had not gone and looked up what the Army defines coaching as a reference point. So that says something about me. It says something about where we're at. I don't know, but I think the definition is useful. And I might be looking at an outdated reference here. I'm looking at this article about mentoring that they cited FM 6-22. So I'll have to go check if that's actually the current reference. So I'll fact check myself later in the show notes if I have to. But FM 6-22 defines coaching as the guidance of another person's development in new or existing skills during the practice of those skills. The manual goes on to list several steps in the coaching process. These include focusing the intent, clarifying self-awareness, uncovering potential, eliminating developmental barriers, developing action plans and commitment, follow-up, and counseling.
I actually really like that.
I really like it.
Who wrote 622? We should have gotten them on 722.
I mean, that's a pretty good. I might have to spend some time with that one later. Like,
Yeah,
that's
might
a useful
reappear
thing to talk to coaches about.
That's actually a really good definition. Well, okay. So, what would be the opposite of that? Should we dive back in?
I think we got to go dive back into the actual answers to the question that this episode is designed to be about.
Yeah, that was a transition.
I appreciate you getting me back on track, but it will tie back to some of these.
I'm glad you went there. That was good. That was really good.
I'm going to knock out 2.5 answers all at once because they're all about not listening. One says doesn't listen and will push you incorrectly to injury. Another says not listening to the command team or not trying to understand the training schedule. And another says not integrating with leadership. And these are all about coaches that are not receptive to communication. So part of communication is how effectively can you communicate information and form relationships. Another aspect of it is how good are you at receiving the information, collecting the information. I think that's just as important for an effective coach in this environment. And clearly a lot of people who answer this do too.
Implementing the information. I think, and we've talked about this before. I don't know. There might be a better word for it, but there's a tendency I have seen with bad coaches. And I may keep doing this, but I'm also going to just include like bad providers, right? Because this is a thing. But I think when you come into this environment, it is easy to assume that you are being brought in as a subject matter expert because you're called a subject matter expert, quite frankly. That's I think that's a heavy crown to wear, and it's a dangerous one because you could very quickly assume that you have all the right answers, which would then put you in a position of thinking that any feedback, information, whatever, from anyone, including leadership, it would lead you to just assume that they're wrong because they aren't you and they therefore don't have all the right answers. And so I think there's a prerequisite, and I don't know how you put this on like a job description, but like we should be hiring more humble people that are willing to receive information and then implement that information.
There is like a prominent thread in the coaching world of like assuming that the Army hired coaches because it decided it was completely fucked up and needed coaches to like redo it entirely.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah, that's good.
And like a subordinate note of that one, that like the job of coaches is to get the Army to stop running so much and start doing squat, bench, and deadlift more.
That's
and I don't think either of those are what the Army was saying when they decided to hire coaches.
I think if you take the perspective, so like if we say that we'll use H2F, right? Like H2F is building something, whatever that something is. But let's take the perspective that the building of that something is a dual effort between Army and human performance. It's not that the Army couldn't do it. Therefore, human performance people should come in and do it for them. It's meant to be collaborative. So what does that mean? I mean, that's kind of the whole point of our platform. But to your point, yeah, it's you're not coming here to fix something that's broken. Although, I mean, that you do get told that a lot.
It's a tough one because I think if we're being honest, like I think about some of the things the Army has achieved with humans. Like the Army has figured out some stuff about human performance and getting teams to do incredible things at a high level. So not everything about how the Army has done business is awful. Yes, the Army has had historically a pretty heinous injury rate, many of them being avoidable, and that is stuff that outside expertise can help them solve. But I think like my first thought when you talked about subject matter expert is I hate how often the Army uses that term. We sling the term expert like crazy. Like the most senior people in our organization have done the thing they do for somewhere between 20 and 30 years. There are way bigger experts outside of it, and they're certainly not experts in all the side things they do in addition to their main profession.
For sure. Team, this episode of Mops and Mo's is brought to you by Train Heroic. Train Heroic is a reliable, well-designed platform for programming, tracking, and communicating with athletes. If you've been with us for any length of time, you will know that Train Heroic is the platform that we use to power our own training, long and strong, which you can find at our website, mopsandmos.com. If you're looking for a solid platform to support your own coaching, whether it's your full-time role or a side hustle, Train Heroic is definitely worth checking out. You can use the link in any of our show notes. You can find it in our newsletter, or you can head to our website, mopsandmos.com/training to get your first week for free.
Before we continue, I'm going to do my fact check live.
Oh.
I found the current version of FM6-22 just to check myself. There do seem to have been minor revisions. Most of this is largely the same, but a few of the words are a little bit different. A coach gets the person or team to understand their current level of performance and guides their performance to the next level. A central coaching task is to link feedback interpretation with developmental actions. And then their list of things, we hit a few of these, but their list of like coaching components includes a couple ones that weren't in that previous version I read. Building rapport is the first one. So like establishing a relationship is the first coaching component, according to the Army. Gathering and analyzing information, that's that listening thing we were just talking about. Addressing the gaps, narrowing focus, setting goals, planning development, promoting action. So I
still like it.
I like it a lot. Like I said, there's
who wrote that?
I'll link it in there. Like FMs never have like a single author associated with them. It is only in H2F land that we fell into that trap to let a single person write the whole doctrine.
Or pose.
That came with some issues, as have been discussed in previous episodes, whatever. But I would assume that for FM6-22, there was a large range of contributing authors. I'll go back and look if I bet they don't endorse any brands in here. We'll see. But I will highly recommend, and I will link this in the show notes. You can find it on Army Pubs, just like every other FM, but I will drop a link to the current version, and you're skipping down to, it's page 2-21, the way they number stuff in these, and my web browser thing is not showing me what actual page it is of the PDF. But the defining coaching section is only like half a page worth of reading. And it's pretty good. I like it. Oh, it's page 42 of the PDF.
For the sake of time, I'll rattle through these last couple on communication if you have any closing thoughts. But I think, like we said, a lot of this just comes back to like a failure to adapt. So interpersonal skills was pointed out. Basically creating injuries, telling soldiers that they're broken, programming for versus teaching how or why to service members.
I like that point too.
I did too. I like the one that says behaviors that lower the stock of the entire team. I mean, yeah, it's so, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on any of those?
I mean, there's a reason we put communication up front. These were the most consistent answers. They had used a lot of the same terminology. There were a lot of them. We'll have a more varied set of answers for the culture and setting piece. But I think if you listen to the next section we're going to do on culture and setting, a lot of those are tied to communication as well. So
Yes.
I can't emphasize enough how important interpersonal skills, willingness to listen when it's appropriate, knowing your way around a unique community like you're going to find in the military, like that stuff's all probably vastly more important than something like writing programs.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said about how to foster good interpersonal skills. That might need to be its own episode because I was about to go on a damn tangent. Okay, culture and setting. Off the top again, something we sort of already mentioned, but a coach who refuses to adapt to working with a tactical population
The
treats
terms
it like
failure to
college.
adapt. Yeah, failure to adapt
over and
appeared
over and
a
over.
lot in the answers on culture. And I'll say, because Drew might not have picked up on this, failure to adapt is one of the chapters you can kick soldiers out of the army for.
Failure to launch is a movie. Matthew McConaughey, right? Isn't he in that?
I think so. I think you're right. Not sure that's helpful, but yes.
I don't know. Is it? Failure to adapt treats it like college. This is kind of similar to that. Just one who does not understand the service member's job, one that can only work with high performers. This seems like a good place to throw in my quote. Maybe.
Ooh, this is a good one. Drew drops some good philosophy stuff occasionally.
So I have a lot of weird hobbies, weird interests. One of those, I'm currently reading a book, and I want to make sure I give it its due. So this book is by Owen Reese. It has absolutely nothing to do with human performance. It's called The Far Edges of the Known World: Life Beyond the Borders of Ancient Civilization. Basically, what this book is about is if you were raised in any kind of Western system, you would think of like Rome and Greece as the center of the ancient world. Therefore, anybody on the outskirts was considered a barbarian, whatever. The argument that Owen Reese makes is that these were actually functioning civilizations themselves, and it's interesting to learn about them. I say all that to say this. One of the quotes in there that I highlighted, as I was coincidentally thinking about strength and conditioning coaches, which is weird, here is the quote. There is a fundamental problem when considering the edges of the world. The edges are determined by where we think the center is. And I thought that was very poignant, talking about strength and conditioning coaches in a tactical setting, because a lot of times coaches come into this world having been centered around what we always talk about: professional sport, collegiate sport, in this case, high performance, whatever you want. That is their center. Therefore, anything that they perceive to be on the fringes of that is oftentimes considered weird, or it's an outlier. I would throw CrossFit in there for a lot of coaches. CrossFit's considered this like weird thing. But
I'm
for a
going to
lot
say
of the
something wild.
athletes,
I think running is something weird.
Running, yeah.
Do a lot.
So I say that because I think for coaches who are having a tough time adapting, or for bad coaches who just have failed to adapt, without getting too philosophical about it, redefining your center will help you have sort of a better understanding of what you consider to be a periphery. And if you broaden your center, what you thought of as like peripheral, weird stuff you don't need to do, if your athletes are actively telling you that that's what they want, then you might reconsider what you feel to be the most important part of your job. Hopefully that metaphor didn't get too drawn out and still makes sense. That's what it was.
You might have slightly overcooked it, but you sound really smart.
I feel smart. That's kind of the most important piece, is that I feel smart. And that's really why we started this podcast. So we could feel
You're probably going to be the
smart.
intro quote for the episode.
That's fine. Hey, listen, so here's what happened for, Tim Ferriss referenced that quote in an email. I saw it, was thinking about strength and conditioning, which is weird, and then bought the book before really knowing anything about it because I wanted to know where the quote came from. And who knows? I might
got it on Kindle, right?
Got it on Kindle. Yeah.
I want to shout out. I don't know if this matters to anybody listening to this. This served me exceptionally well in undergrad, and it served me well in like
reading.
Not as often since then, but pretty frequently. Kindles highlighting system where you can like look at just stuff you've highlighted and it'll like reference the page and the text and like whatever. Like, dude,
awesome.
Really, really
I'm
useful.
trying to this year, 2026. I'm trying to do more Audible and less podcast. I don't like Audible, but I've started to do Whisper Sync, which is where when you buy the Kindle edition, you also do the Audible edition, and like when you stop one and pick it up on the other, it still like syncs.
So anyway, mine already does the syncing. I keep that separate though, man.
I'm just trying to redefine my center.
I pretty typically have an audiobook I'm listening to and like a Kindle book I'm reading, and they are totally unrelated. I don't do the syncing thing. Like,
no, I know. I'm the same way. I read about 15 books at a time, but man, we sound like douchebags.
I don't read 15 books at a time. I read one reading book at a time and one listening book at a time. And I'll be honest, I really only use Audible. There's a few niche books that are like better on Audible than they are written. I will shout out the Dungeon Crawler Carl series because it's amazing as an audiobook. I will also shout out why am I blanking on the name of the one that's about to be a movie? Come on.
I'm not going to be able to help you.
The biggest fan of this podcast, Carrie Peacock, is going to be extremely mad at me for forgetting.
I think they're redoing the Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter.
I swear I just read Project Hail Mary. I need to get my shit together because I just listened to it.
That's the Ryan Reynolds.
Ryan Gosling?
Right? Gosling. I get confused.
Yeah.
That's the movie he's in.
Yeah. So those are niche categories where it's like better on audiobook because like some of the sound stuff matters in those. But for basically everything else, I use audiobook to either reread, so to speak, or re-listen to a book I previously read by like traditional text reading the first time, especially if I have to like closely follow the plot or something. Or I use it for like professionally relevant books that I'm just not motivated enough to read, and I can digest a little bit easier listening.
Well, there you go, team. This episode is brought to you by reading.
Big sponsors. More of it.
Yeah. Big fans. Culture. So, this one's fun. Not getting the physical requirements. Had a coach say we didn't need to run so much, that 10 miles per week was too much. Who was this one that had a name that you deleted? I just want to know who said that.
No, they didn't name anyone specifically. I don't think anybody like straight up named a person in their answers, but some were like very individual stories.
Do you think tactical strength and conditioning coaches should run more?
Yes.
Same. Not controversial here, maybe controversial for people listening. Maybe that should be its own episode. No, I agree with you.
I think see there are probably settings, like maybe in spaces like Air Force or Space Force, or like highly technical roles, like if you're working at like the NSA or things like that. I could see a world where I'm getting there. We'll see if I meet you halfway, where I would be okay with non-running cardio taking up more of the space, like accepting more and more cross training. But if we're talking about like ground force populations of any kind, I feel like running has to be the predominant form of cardio. And cardio has to be a significant portion. Aerobic conditioning has to play a significant role.
I am of the opinion that running more is better in all circumstances, minus some sort of like debilitating injury. Running more is better than not running. And the reason
I push back, link your new article. I'm gonna have to.
Sure. Yeah, go for it. The reason I have pushed back on the oft heard comments about, the more technical positions, you do see a lot of research out there where like aerobic capacity does have a lot of implications for cognitive ability. So
100%. That's why I didn't say throw away aerobic in general. I'm just more comfortable. Like if they want to swim or stairmaster or bike or elliptical
Yeah,
or
no,
whatever,
that's fair. I'll give you that.
I am
But I think
more open to that in those populations.
I think where we go awry is that a lot of bad coaches, because they themselves don't like to run, think that they can substitute gym-based stuff for aerobic base building. And this is not to go into the physiological rabbit hole of the statement that I just made, but I think as a coach, I am of the opinion that you should be able to do what you're telling your athletes to do. And oftentimes exposing yourself to some of those things is in and of itself a phenomenal like learning opportunity anyway. I hated running. I knew that the guys I worked with needed to run. I therefore got into running literature, running training. I still suck at running, but I know a lot more about it and I do it. Yoga, same way. Strength training, same thing. So again, I don't want to belabor that point, but I think this particular example that we got submitted to us, a coach said we didn't need to run so much. I just would be very curious to like understand why they think that. It's pretty absurd.
It's easy to explain on a surface level why somebody might think that, right? Like the Army has a huge number of injuries that come from physical training, and those injuries most commonly are lower body overuse, micro trauma type injuries, largely attributable to running. And so like a knee-jerk reaction to that would be, oh, stop running so much. But like there's a reason the Army was doing the running and accepting the injury rates. And that's probably because it's like fairly foundational to the mission. Sure. I think a coach's job is much more oriented towards how do we get them good at that without all those injuries.
Correct.
That's like, it's not to
I think it's
take the thing. Like every elite organization in the military has running standards, pretty high ones too.
I think it's like a deeper amalgamation of things. One you already mentioned, which was that like we moved away from a PT test that was very run heavy, and the narrative that went along with that to an extent was that like running, to your point, was dangerous or bad or whatever. We also saw a massive influx of stationary/heavy physical training equipment onto Army installations, which would then support the narrative that we should be lifting said heavy/stationary pieces of equipment. Thirdly, we started to hire a shit ton of strength coaches that came from the National Strength and Conditioning Association, an organization of which I would argue does not really place a priority on running training at all. Case in point, what is the industry certification that you need to have? It's your CSCS. It's not your USA track and field anything. Not that it needs to be. I'm just saying you could potentially broaden your prospective coaching base by including some of these things. So you put all of those things together, and I think you end up doing something that we've talked about before, which is swinging the pendulum so far in the other direction where we don't really place an emphasis on running at all. It's all about lifting. But watch any war movie. Saving Private Ryan, there's a lot of running. There's very little, if any, hex bar deadlifting or squatting that I remember. It's been a while. They run quite a bit. So, I say that to be intentionally funny, but run more than 10 miles a week is what I would say if you want to be a good coach.
And I'll also cite Drew on this. Like I mentioned, I'm going to link his article that he just posted. When he says run more than 10 miles a week, that doesn't mean if you are currently not running at all to switch to running more than 10 miles a week. A lot of the injuries that we just talked about related to running are because of a lack of progression, a lack of consistency, huge spikes in troughs in volume. That's the kind of stuff coaches are there to help.
Which is funny
mitigate.
Because that same situation would play out if you jumped into squatting heavy without doing any kind of, but coaches, bad coaches don't ever have that conversation. Like running's dangerous. Well, yeah, but you agree like running without any experience is dangerous. Yeah, well, of course. Okay. So is squatting dangerous? No, but is squatting without any, well, yeah, obviously. Okay, cool. And then you walk away. You want to hit the one with Riley?
Yeah, I'll highlight this one because this is an exception. I said a little bit ago that people didn't name anyone in their answers. This is the exception, but they named him in a positive light.
Friend of the show.
Yeah. So the full answer here was no clue of the demands. If you want the gold standard, see Riley. And I think, and that's a reference to Riley Keller. If you don't know who he is, he has a previous podcast episode. Highly, highly recommend it. He is a coach up at J Bear in Alaska.
Somewhat of a hermit in the best possible way.
He's fantastic. If you try to like follow him on social media, he will not accept you because he doesn't know you. He's not interested in building a brand. He's just running a really good program. And I think getting back to the running thing, Riley's done some cool work in two ways here. One is, I know in like the deep dark past, Riley was accused of just being like a strongman powerlifting strength bro type of coach who like doesn't know what he's telling people to do when he gives them conditioning programs. And Riley said, "Okay, bet. Like I'll just prove it to you," and got really fast too.
I love that.
So he's obnoxiously strong and also lays out 12-minute 2 miles like on a pretty regular basis. Does a lot of ruck running. Gets after it in like really cold Alaskan weather.
Backcountry hunter.
But the other thing he does is a little bit of a specialty in preparing soldiers for ruck-based selections and standards and missions and things like that, using less time rucking and running, largely because of the environment in Alaska in the winter. But I will tell you that does not mean, and this comes back to my like degree of accepting of cross-training cardio modalities. That does not mean he goes easy on the conditioning. If you've been to Riley's facility, you'll see some heinous Jacob's Ladder stuff. Like, yes, there are ways to work around how much running volume you do, but that means you're going to have to replace it with things that might suck just as much.
Yeah, I remember the Jacob's Ladder conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of these, I mean, just kind of perusing, a lot of these come back to what we've talked about already. Failure to adapt. You see that one again.
Yeah. I figured we'd cherry pick a couple of these.
Sure.
For the audience, we're finishing out the culture setting block, which has a lot of answers from you guys, and a lot of them are very, very similar. So I think there are a couple we can skip to that stood out to me. One that I have to push back on is, and I'll just read the whole thing here and then give my answer, but it was general understanding that you can't identify with service members unless you were in, implying that coaches can't really connect with members of the military if they themselves never were in the military. And I'm going to go ahead and disagree.
Yeah, I am too, actually.
I think there are certain advantages that are provided by a coach being prior service. Like it certainly is going to help you get up to speed on the language faster. You understand some of the things they're stressed about outside of the fitness world. That's all cool. That is not to say that a coach can't come into the tactical space without military experience and be absolutely fantastic. And in many ways, that's important for them to bring other perspectives, have an outsider view, change things a little bit. Like that's all also totally valuable.
This might be a hot take. If you're the type of service member who needs only listen to other service members to feel as though it's legitimate, that's a you problem. That's not a coach problem. That's not a subject matter expert problem. And that is not to say that prior service coaches, providers, specialists, whoever are not awesome. That's definitely an added thing that they bring to the table. But I do think that there is this kind of, man, I don't want to be like too brutal here, but there's this like ego thing on the athlete side of this equation. And you don't just see this in tactical, you see this in really any sporting environment where there's a closed-mindedness to anyone who hasn't been there, done that. And I think that you do miss a lot of potential goodness if you've already given yourself that barrier.
I'll say that as a pretty young soldier, when I was early in my time on active duty, the coach who had the most impact on me and is like the reason I am working in this field now would have to be Mark Taysom. And he was not prior service and brought a really different and unique perspective.
Well, and I think it goes to what we've said quite a bit, which is that like really excelling in human performance is a human thing more than it is a performance thing. And if your whole identity is wrapped up in being a tactical person, again, being a football player, being whatever, if that's your whole identity and you can't gain from like a Mark Taysom, for example, then again, I would say that that's like a you thing. Just I'd be curious as to why that is. I did have one on here that I wanted to hit, which was oh my goodness, where did it go? Where did it go? Waiting for soldiers to come to them versus outreach. Oh my God, is that a huge one? I think, where do I want to go with this? I think that when before I should say, as new equipment started showing up, as programs started getting built on the Army side of things, I think that there was this early assumption that if you build it, they will come kind of stuff. Like if we have a gym, soldiers will come. If we do, we're way past that now to the point where like if you are not as a coach, if you are not going out and actively engaging in the battle rhythm of your population, be that training meetings at a leadership level, be that field events at like a boots on the ground kind of level, and you're just expecting that soldiers are going to come to you, then yeah, I mean, I think you're, as per the title of this episode, you're being a bad coach. I don't understand why you wouldn't do that, maybe, is what I would say.
Well, I'm going to tie that one to some related comments that are in the other bucket at the end. And I'll knock out a couple of these. One is like Shams on PRT does nothing, leaves at 1300 on the dot. I'm not actually opposed to like leaving exactly at the time your hours end. I'm actually kind of supportive of that.
Oh yeah.
But if you've like done nothing during those hours, that's when that kind of stuff becomes an issue. Another one said like a bad strength coach ends their shift after morning PT, refuses to support other programs, reconditioning, whatever, considers workday over once PT ends. And I'll be honest, I traveled a lot and saw a lot of H2F teams, and I love coaches and I love these programs. But I can understand why people would be real pissed because I've walked into a lot of spaces where after 8:00, coaches are doing nothing. And in this world, if we want to make this stuff work, you're going to have to be proactive. You're going to have to be a self-starter. You're going to have to do some outreach. You're going to have to be there. Like I guarantee units in your formation are doing something where physicality is relevant and you could be out there with them. You could be selling. You could be designing stuff. Like I understand. Like it's hard. I guess it's hard for like, yes, somebody running a program should be giving out tasks to those people, but sometimes leadership is swamped and trying to handle other things, and we need people to just come up with tasks for themselves, and that allows you to chase your passions and build a thing that's like really personal and cool to you.
I think it
just
almost
like waiting to be given tasks thing does not work.
I think that to me, maybe the differentiator between a good coach and a bad coach, like, you know, let's say two coaches go into a meeting with a commander, the commander expresses what they want their human performance program to look like. A bad coach would then kind of just sit and wait for the Army to make that happen. And then I would argue that a good coach would probably say, okay, sir, ma'am, like, what do you need from me to make that happen? And then that coach would go and do those things. By that same token, though, I do think that the coaching profession is an interesting one in this setting because I do think that a lot of our more hands-on providers, PTs, ATs, whomever, they can be seduced by the allure of productivity because their population comes to them, and because their schedules fill up with these people, they assume that they are being very productive. And this is not to say that they're not being productive in a lot of cases, but the coaching side of this is unique because they have to go out and actually market, sell, do the thing. Again, there's variation to the point I'm making here, but the point for coaches is understand that marketing, that sales, that interpersonal relationships, like we've been talking about, that's a huge piece of your job. People are not just going to come to you the same way that they do an MSK provider because that's not the way that relationship works. So to go from being a bad coach to a good coach, you have to get out there, basically.
I'll tie that to the next one I wanted to highlight that's on here. I'll also teach Drew that you can hit the mute button before you cough and sneeze. It'd be super helpful.
I'm doing that to make it hard for you. That was for you.
Another one I wanted to hit is uh, coaches that refuse to train the trainer and don't empower small unit leaders to help them. And I'll say this from experience in my current role, and I know it's different with different coach to athlete ratios and things like that. But I think if coaches are doing the sales piece well, you're going to get really busy really fast and not be able to be everywhere that people want you to be, right? You can only be in so many places at once. Certain times of day are very popular. Even if you do PT sessions at multiple times of the day, they still tend to be clustered at that like 6:30 time, the lunch time, the 3 o'clock time. Um, and I remember from early days, there were a lot of coaches who were thinking that like if they do too good a job teaching NCOs the stuff they know, that they'll just cut all the coaches once then the NCOs know what to do. You got to have a really low opinion of your own level of like
That's not how it
knowledge and
works.
talent to think that's going to happen. um, I don't think people need to be afraid of like help. Like the term I like, and I think I might have stolen this from Riley, so he's getting another shout out. But like creating autonomous athletes. Like if you're doing coaching right, your athletes should be picking up on the things you're doing, so that when they end up PCSing to go somewhere else, or you leave to go somewhere else, or whatever happens, that their training is better even after they're not training with you because of what they did with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
The other,
no disagreement on my end.
the last one I'll hit, unless you have others in this culture bucket that you want to hit, is all the person wrote was unrealistic expectations. So I don't know exactly what they were talking about. It may be unrealistic expectations for like how fit the population they work with is. It might be unrealistic expectations for how nice a facility they have. It might be unrealistic expectations for how on autopilot the program is. Cause it's like a coach might expect to step into a place where like football trains at this time, soccer trains at this time, baseball trains at this time. They come in, they execute the program. It's awesome. Continue. And like, that's not the world we live in. I do want to say I lay a little bit of the unrealistic expectations blame on the companies that are recruiting the contractors. I think things have gotten a little bit better, I hope, because the program's bigger and there's more awareness. But there were some really crazy expectations set in the recruiting and hiring process, especially early on, for like what this was going to be and what coaches were going to do. So it's not, there's more multifactorial pieces of this.
Yeah, for sure. I think, and similar to what we did in the communications bucket, I think a lot of the remaining points here, you could kind of file them all under just a failure to adapt, whether that's a misinterpretation of the types of athletes that you're working with, not understanding the athletes, not understanding leadership, closed-mindedness, my way or the highway, et cetera, et cetera. To me, that all just kind of goes back to a failure to adapt. So,
Yeah.
interdisciplinary. This one is an interesting one because I would actually go so far as to say that the biggest issue I see across interdisciplinary teams is just a failure to actually be interdisciplinary. Not even just with coaches. I think that that's with any. I think there is a scope creep is a phrase that comes up often, and I've seen it play out in real time where a provider of any capacity, dietitian, PT, coach, whatever, has a very protective attitude towards what it is that they do, so much so that they just refuse to allow for any other provider, practitioner, whatever, to wade into those waters. An example I would use would be like an athlete asking a coach a question about like carbohydrates or whatever, and the coach answering that question and then getting berated later by a dietitian because you're not a dietitian, you shouldn't have that conversation. And that goes a lot of different ways. That's not to like single any profession out, but I do think at the tip of its spear, a human performance program is what its customer perceives it to be. What I mean by that, and I'll use strength coaches here. Strength coaches get their panties in a bundle when they're called personal trainers. But if my way of connecting with an athlete is to converse as though he perceives me to be a personal trainer, then I'm going to do that. And I see dietitians get so bent out of shape when soldiers call them nutritionists, so much so that they refuse to work with the soldier. Well, hey, guess what, dietitian? You just failed at your job because that soldier may not have the nuance or know-how to understand the difference between those two things. But because your like ego got in the way, you just close the door on a potential customer. And I think when we start to think of our population that we serve as customers instead of just like willing lemmings, it changes the way in which you approach those things. Now, I may have just totally taken us off the interdisciplinary cliff, but please feel free to bring me back.
No, I think you hit most of what was in people's responses around interdisciplinary. A lot of it stems from
Good.
like forgetting about the holistic part.
Yes.
The only one you didn't kind of already touch on from people's answers that I want to shout out, and this falls into the same kind of thing you were talking about. But somebody pointed out not willing to bridge the gap between return to duty and return to performance. And
Mm-hmm.
this has been a huge thing in places that don't have embedded human performance programs. Is like you've been discharged from clinical physical therapy, but you're not quite 100% on being able to do everything you were able to do before, and there's nobody there to help you with that gap. I think one of the most crucial roles in interdisciplinary relationships in these embedded military human performance teams is between physical therapists, athletic trainers, and coaches to like help bridge that gap from like acute when the injury happens to the like the rehab process to the return to duty process to the return to performance. Like that stuff all blurs together, and it's only going to work if you have really good relationships between those different types of providers to navigate that whole process.
I think it's that. I also think it's the program itself doing a good job defining what those things actually are.
Yeah.
On a lot of different levels. I mean, that's almost like an organizational failure less than a strength and conditioning failure. I mean, if we assume, and you may know this, I don't, but if we assume that this was a comment submitted by a provider, my question to the provider would be, well, have you educated said coach on what that would even look like? And if you have and they're still failing, then fair play. But if that hasn't been a conversation that's taken place and you're just wondering why this performance oriented person does not have a head for clinical work, that's something that you can address as a team. So
Mhm.
I don't know. Barbell bros.
Uh,
This one's going to be
yeah,
fun.
I think we can move through this one pretty fast because we already kind of addressed it
Yeah,
with
we
the
did.
running and
We did, I
conditioning
think.
stuff.
Yeah.
But there were some answers that like uniquely fell into this specific category, and I'll just rattle off a few of them pretty fast. Unwillingness to go beyond the weight room,
Hmm.
focusing purely on strength, taking a powerlifting approach, only coaching strength and skipping all of the conditioning.
Hmm.
We kind of addressed this up front with coaches preferring that space and being comfortable in that space and needing to get out of that space. I don't
Yeah.
really have that much more to say here other
I
than
mean,
like that's not the move.
I would say this maybe like as a coach, like you're also a human with your own interests and hobbies and things. And like you can be a power lifter, you can be a
Mm-hmm.
strongman, you can be a
100%.
bodybuilder, like do those things. You don't even have to be a runner, but like understand and realize that you're not trying to create images of yourself amongst the athletes that you work with. You're trying to create better images of who they already are. And if that involves running, you should know about running programming. I think maybe this would have been a better place to do my quote, but another one that comes to mind is like if what is it? If you're a hammer, every problem looks like a nail or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um and that's kind of exactly this. So I don't know, new year, 2026, strength coach public service announcement, like go read some running stuff. And hey, runners, like go read some strength stuff. I mean, find a book that makes you uncomfortable and not like in a 50 Shades of Grey kind of uncomfortable, but like I don't like to run. I'm going to go read Jack Daniels, running book. I don't know. Have you read? I've never read 50 Shades of Grey.
Neither have I. Sorry.
Well, you're an audiobook guy. I didn't know if you like listen to it. Anyway, um, let's avoid that cliff.
That brings
Programming.
us to our
Poof.
last big bucket, which is
Yeah.
programming. I'll be honest,
Oh
I was
man.
kind of hoping when I put up this question that nobody was going to even mention programming in what makes a coach bad, and I was going to make an awesome point about how it's not about the programming. Um, that
Yeah.
was not quite the case. We did get some programming answers.
Mm.
I'm going to hit one first. I said I would keep all these anonymous. I am going to keep this one anonymous, but it did come from a medical provider on a team. So that is important context here. But I will quote theirs. It says, the biggest thing strength and conditioning coaches do is teach NCOs how to write PT plans and program for the unit. So if they teach bad load or volume, then more soldiers get injured or fail fitness tests. I don't agree.
I don't
One, I
think I
don't
do
agree.
either.
I don't agree that the biggest thing strength coaches do is teach NCOs how to program. Like I think that's a piece of what they do potentially.
Should we say
Frankly, if
what
I'm
this
having,
profession is? Because we could have some fun with that. We don't have to, but
it's up to you.
mm. Mm. Mm.
Think
I don't
about it.
know.
Well, I talk about some other stuff.
Yeah, you talk. You talk.
One is that if I have a strength coach who's going to teach NCOs things, I actually care way more about that strength coach teaching the like logistics of running a session than I do
Mm-hmm.
about teaching program design. Like if they can make NCOs get more comfortable planning and leading workouts that flow well, I care about that more than program design variables like
Mm-hmm.
volume management and stuff. Like I do care about volume management. I do care about like reasonable approaches to that and people knowing some of the basics. But I think we way over index on like classroom style teaching of program design and don't do nearly enough of the like the practical, like you have
Logistics.
X, Y, and Z pieces of equipment. How do you run a decent session with just that stuff? And I also think that like it's only true that the programming is to blame for injuries or failures on PT tests if all the soldiers are following the programming every time. And I know
Mm-hmm.
that they aren't. So that one goes out the window pretty fast.
Yeah, this is man. This one's hard because obviously, by virtue of the fact that this person engaged in the Instagram, makes me think that they might listen to the podcast. So I don't want to say anything wrong. Um, the biggest thing S&C coaches do is teach NCOs how to write PT plan. I don't. I think. Well, in my ideal world, the biggest thing that coaches do is go out and represent the H2F program in whatever capacity that looks like. Attending training meetings, engaging with leadership, because they have the flexibility and ability to do that on a different level than
Can
a
we pause
physical
for a second?
therapist. Please.
I think it's important to state at this point that it's crazy that we would not agree that the biggest thing strength and conditioning coaches do is coach. That's a conversation for another podcast entirely because that's a
But
source of a
you and
lot
I
of tension.
don't agree on that, or what do you mean?
The Army doesn't, the military doesn't. Like
Oh,
NCOs, especially
yeah.
senior NCOs, have big feelings about whether coaches should coach or not.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
And we'll probably return
right.
to that another
It's a whole
day. But
different.
beside the point.
I just no. I think that physical training. I don't know why I said that weird. Physical training is a very unique um, foot in the door in terms of integrating your H2F team or your embedded team into your organization. I think it's a unique tool because it's a common language across the chasm, so to speak. Occupational therapy, physical therapy, athletic training, all the more medical type interventions, I think soldiers perceive that as something that descends from on high when needed by special people who know special things. And that's fine. It should be that way. But physical training is a common language, and the most fluent speakers of that language are your strength and conditioning coaches. And so they should be able to use that tool to go and engage with the organization and bring customers, again, I'll use that word, to your program. And so if we just assume that coaches are dumb gorillas that write how many squats should you do, then yeah, I mean, I could see how this person gets this perspective. But like, man, I would, if you're listening and you know that this is you, like maybe go like talk to your coach, like get to know him. I don't know. What an interesting take. A lot of these programming ones, I think that, and I realize we've said this every single time now, but we've kind of touched on most of these in some form or fashion.
Yeah, I also am gonna need to like race through some. We're already over an hour.
No, I
I'm
know,
probably
but
in trouble for
sometimes we do that.
podcasting too late, but
That's fine.
um,
Go.
I do want to hit a couple. There, several
I
referenced
love what you
unwillingness to
highlighted.
be. We'll get there in a second. Unwillingness to be flexible is a big one that appeared in the programming stuff. Like people have a
Failure
certain
to
way of
adapt.
programming, they're dogmatic, whatever. So yeah, the failure to adapt theme came up again.
Mm-hmm.
Underestimating the importance of cardio and aerobic stuff came up several times in here.
I
Yeah,
actually
so like a lot
I
of the
like this
programming stuff
one.
comes down to
Focusing on complex movements and periodized training instead of the basics. Shout out to that person. Man, don't get me started on like run technique. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that.
yeah.
Basics. Focus on the
Don't
basics.
coach things because you like to coach them.
Yeah.
Coach them because the person needs it or the unit needs
If
it.
you can't, here's another quote. This is Feynman, physicist. If you can't explain it to a 5-year-old, you don't understand it.
Is there anything else under programming we need to hit, or can we wrap up with like other and some random stuff?
I think we can wrap it up more or
Okay.
less.
Two themes stood out in the ones I put in the other bucket. One, we only got this one once, and it probably belongs in the interdisciplinary bucket. If I'm being honest, I probably categorized this one wrong. But not recommending soldiers to medical providers fast enough, and or making dangerous medical diagnoses.
Don't do that.
Yeah, definitely don't diagnose anyone. Like that's an easy one for somebody
illegal.
who's not a medical provider. But this does get into the challenge of like operating in an interdisciplinary environment, like knowing there should be some overlapping of scope. Like people should be able to talk about other people's domains. That's part of the nature of the beast. You should have those relationships, but they shouldn't cross so far into somebody else's domain that they're getting so egregiously out of scope that they're like not letting someone see a provider who should, or they're telling somebody something about a diagnosis or condition that's way out of scope for them. So that's an easy one.
I want to know what medical diagnosis some coach was like. Oh, your knee caved in on that squat. I think you have cancer. What?
I feel like it's more likely that they minimized something that was actually major than they told somebody they had something major that could have been minor.
I have often thought, I don't yet know how to crack this nut, but we talk about metrics a lot. I think the best metric you could create for a strength coach is how many referrals they made to other providers on the team. And I don't know how you would encapsulate that, but
in my day job role, we try a little bit to track some of the like referrals outside our team, like to other programs and things like that. We call it a warm handoff. It'd be kind of cool to track referrals within the team.
Like I think a well-run program, you'd see a lot of behavioral health referrals coming from strength coaches.
Yeah, 100%.
Because they have those conversations. Anyway.
Should we hit the other one from the other bucket?
Yeah, this one's funny.
Heard this a few times, popped up in a few messages. Being fat.
Just you're fat.
Kind
you're
of a
fat.
problem.
You're fat.
Just being.
Can a fat coach be good? Can a fat coach be a good coach?
They certainly can be good, but their fatness is working against them.
It's like let's look at the opposite, right? Would you trust a thin chef?
There are good thin chefs, but like it might on first impression you might be like, oh, this guy's not that into food.
Right. And I would agree with you. We actually have a very thin, actually very fit chef who we spoke to.
Yeah.
Which that will be out before that. Anyway.
Yeah.
They are fat. Man. I think we'll call a spade a spade. In this space, the way you look goes a long way. And that is not just a strength and conditioning thing. That is an operator thing. That is a soldier. Like how you look, your first impression goes a long way. So if you are fat, man, I feel bad even saying that. If you're fat, I think you're going to have a harder time selling yourself. Now, I get that there's a lot that goes into people's body weight. And please don't take this to mean that like we're just bashing overweight coaches. I mean, but hopefully this point makes sense, because I think to your point, it did come up multiple times.
Everybody has advantages and disadvantages. Everybody has strengths and weaknesses. You can still be good at what you do with a weakness or a disadvantage. I have lots of weaknesses. I have lots of disadvantages. That is okay. Your body composition can be one of those, and you can still move on and do fantastic things. At the same time, it is like, I'll just lay out a vignette, a thing that happens to me a lot. An example of the restraint I exercise running the Instagram page. A lot of coaches slide into my DMs telling me how dumb I am and how wrong I am about stuff, and what an idiot I am and what a hack I am and all that stuff. And sometimes it takes everything I have to not just like screenshot their comment and screenshot a picture of them from their social media page and post them in my story together.
Oh man.
And I'll just say that, like, if putting your words and a picture of you together on my story would be interpreted as like mean or insulting, that means that is a weakness you are dealing with on a daily basis in your job.
Would you say you get more hate from heavier set lifting types or leaner aerobic types?
Heavier set lifting types for sure.
So could we deduce then that running makes you nicer?
I don't know. I'm not sure that's how causality works, but
I mean, it's not nothing.
I just watched was it Steve House be a total dick to another coach? I think that was who it was.
I hope so, because I know Steve. I'm happy to talk to him about it.
Dude, it was.
You gotta send that to me.
I'll talk to you offline. Yeah, okay. It's public though. I can send it to you.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. So run more, be nicer, adapt better, read books, don't give out medical diagnoses.
I'll sling one we didn't talk about. It didn't appear in any of the messages, but it's something that's been on my mind as we talk about coaches establishing relationships with people. Principles of exercise prescription call for individualization. Even for the Army, FM 7-22 calls for individualization. Individualization is largely unrealistic in most of the settings our coaches operate in. Some degree of individualization is possible if you're doing one-on-one programming for people, but depending on how much time you have in a day, that's going to get really hard depending on how many people are seeking out your services. I've been thinking about this a lot recently, and I don't think the individualization is as much about the programming being unique to the person or the training session being unique to the person or the unit. It's more about them feeling like it is. Like if you give the exact same program to a dozen people, but each person feels like you listened to their unique needs, strengths, weaknesses, situations, and arrived at this program that works for them, it doesn't actually matter that you gave a really similar program to other people. Like, individualization is just as much about the relationship as it is about the program design. I could be crazy. That's my current hypothesis.
I was prepared to debate you on that, and I think I agree with you. I would also add that there are a lot of ways to individualize a program beyond just exercises and reps and sets, which you sort of got at a little bit there. But, and again, probably a separate podcast, could be a blog post, whatever. From a programming standpoint, when you get into some of these more nuanced tools like autoregulation or constraints or whatever, you can give large groups of people some modicum of choice and autonomy when it comes to training, and that kind of checks the individualization box. And when you layer on top of that all the things we've talked about, kind of the interpersonal stuff, the like adapting to your culture, then yeah, I think you arrive at the point you just made, which was like a beautifully individualized program that could look the same on paper from one organization to the next, but because of the way that you deliver it and the way that it's run, it meets the needs of the group that you're working with. The other thing, I'll just double tap it because I think you did hit it there. Coaches oftentimes hear the word individualization and they think that that only exists at the level of the single human. You have to think of individualization which by the way is a hard word to say over and over again. You have to think of it at the human level, sure, but more broadly at like the company level or the battalion level or the brigade level. And it may just legitimately be that you don't have the resources to truly individualize at the person level. But if you're giving like 3 or 4 companies the exact same program, that's where I would argue like, okay, we should probably take another look at this because you're not meeting these people where they're at. You're failing to adapt, just to kind of bring this all the way back. And don't be fat, I think is what I would say. Man. Any stones unturned? A lot of stones. We didn't read all this, but
yeah, there's way more we could talk about in future conversations. I think we'll come back to some pieces of this. I think we'll probably come back to the doctrinal definition of coaching for some more conversation.
I really like that one. That was good.
I'm just weaving doctrine in. What a nerd.
Do the different branches have different definitions of coaching?
Yes.
That'd be interesting. Mm-hmm. Okay, gang. Thanks for hanging out. I think that's all we had to say about that for now. Remember, we mentioned this at the top. If you've gotten all the way to this point, you think that the two of us sound like assholes, just take everything we said and flip it over. And this actually ended up being a very enlightening podcast on how to be a good coach. So on that note, thanks for hanging out this week. See you next week. Hey, Alex, let's cover our ass real quick.
Oh, great idea, Drew. All right, guys. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode. Before you go, please rate and review the pod on the listening platform of your choice. You can also visit us on our website at www.mopsinmos.com. That's mops, the letter N, mos.com. You can check out the library of podcast episodes, our latest blog entries, any helpful resources, and also sign up for our newsletter.
Drew nailed it. Just to underline a couple of things, the podcast entries have in-depth show notes on the website. So if you missed anything or you want to read any of the research we talk about, it is all there. You can, at the bottom of the website, sign up with your email and receive future updates from us. The blog posts go a little bit more in depth in kind of written form on a couple of topics we get questions about all the time. But most importantly, I just want to ask all you guys, our best way the word gets out is absolutely word of mouth. So tell your friends, tell the people you work with, anybody you think would find it useful. Thanks for spreading the word.
If you have any questions or comments, feel free to shoot us an email at either Drew or Alex at mopsinmos.com.
Or there's a contact form on the website.
Thank you.